Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1979 suspense thriller horror film, When a Stranger Calls. Now, When a Stranger Calls is a film directed by Fred Walton. Fred Walton also wrote the film alongside screenwriter Steve Feck, and they collaborated together on a short film called The Sitter. Now, The Sitter is featured as a bonus feature on this Blu-ray, and The Sitter was a bit of a hit for both of them. It garnered a good amount of critical acclaim. It was played in front of various different films around the time. It even won some awards. So, understandably, Steve and Fred got together and thought, hey, this would be a perfect project for us to adapt into a feature film so we can really get our feet further inside the door when it comes to Hollywood and future projects. It was a case of perfect timing because you had the success of films like John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, as well as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So there was a demand for horror and for suspense or thriller films of this particular type. The film was actually released by Columbia Pictures, which at the time was actually a pretty large studio. And so they had the benefit of studio backing their film when it comes to advertising and when it comes to getting a wide release. It actually did fairly well for a low budget movie. I mean, it made $20 million, and the film only cost around, I believe, it was like something like 1.5 million, and it made 20 million in the box office, and it did fairly well in home video. The film also made its mark on popular culture. This is a movie that a lot of people know about, even though they haven't necessarily seen it. And the reason why is because of iconic moments like Have You Checked the Children? Or the whole bit where the police officer is calling the babysitter and telling her over the phone that we traced the call and it's coming from inside the house. So when a lot of people think about that particular kind of storyline and that moment in film, a lot of people look at When a Stranger Calls. Despite the fact that Black Christmas predated the film and had a similar setup with disturbing prank phone calls and the whole reveal that it was coming from inside the house. But despite that, I can see why it's made its mark on the public lexicon, because if we're just talking about the first 20 minutes of this movie, it's really good. The first 20 minutes of When a Stranger Calls is fantastic. It's terrific, nail-biting terror at its finest. It really does a wonderful job creating a sense of dread and unrelenting fear. And it is easily one of the best series of sequences that I've seen when it comes to building that particular kind of tension. And a big part of that is due to Fred Walton's direction. I think Fred Walton did a fantastic job directing this movie. I particularly liked how he shot the sequences inside an apartment complex, or in a home, or outside in and around and on the streets of the city. I like how he shot those scenes because they are wide open spaces, most of them, but they still feel somewhat claustrophobic. They still have this mood and atmosphere that is very foreboding and genuinely frightening, as if you're just waiting for something scary or something horrible to happen, something to pop out of the shadows at any moment. And I think that's a huge testament to Fred Walton's direction. I also love the fact that the film has this gritty, kind of grimy look to it, which adds even more realism to the film in terms of the added grit. And the sequences that are supposed to be suspenseful are really top notch, because I think Fred, as well as his cinematographer and his editor, they did a really bang up job making the audience on edge and really ratcheting up the suspense and the overall tension. Uh, and the overall approach for it, I really liked. It was a slow build, kind of slow burn, then it builds up to a crescendo, and it even ties into the sound editing, because Fred deliberately decided to have the sound editing uh, involve the phone calls, the mysterious phone calls that Jill receives, also increase and escalate themselves when it comes to how loud they are. So by the time she gets the final phone call, it's just blaring and absolutely overwhelming, and I thought that was a really nice touch. I will say this though, I think the screenplay by Fred and Steve, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's ultimately what makes this movie just an alright film for me, because you have this absolutely amazing, great first 20 minutes that are the epitome of terror and suspense. And then you have a really plodding, boring, honestly pretty forgettable middle of the movie, with a very shambling, not that suspenseful or exciting manhunt for the killer. And the film really starts to lose steam after the first 20 minutes in a pretty significant way. The film apparently got some mixed reviews by critics when it came out, and honestly, I'm not surprised, because I'm pretty mixed on it myself, because of the middle of the film, which to me just brings the film down so much. And it's ultimately due to the writing. The decision to reveal who the killer is after the first 20 minutes and then try to make you sympathetic towards him was a mistake. I think it would have benefited more from having a mystery about who the killer is. Maybe instead of having it be that he was caught but then escaped 7 years later from an insane asylum and he's on the loose, instead, we don't know who he is, so it becomes this game of a whodunit, and they throw in red herrings and really surprise you with somebody that you didn't see coming being the killer. I understand why they went for what they decided to go with, because they were trying to do something different. And on one hand, I appreciate that. I appreciate the approach to make the killer more human, and not your stereotypical just crazy guy. So I do appreciate the approach to make Kurt someone who is genuinely horrible when it comes to his actions, uh, but someone that also is a very sick man. And I do appreciate that approach, but and the overall variety when it comes to this character, when it comes to his craziness. It's not just crazy all the time, like he's just some rambling madman. I appreciate that approach. And there are things about the middle that I liked. For instance, the exchange between Charles Durning's character, John Clifford, and Rachel Roberts' character, Dr. Monk, at the Psychiatric Institute. I thought that was a good scene of two good actors going back and forth at one another. And there's some good performances by Coleen Dewhurst as Tracy, and Tony Buckley as Kurt, and Charles Durning as John Clifford. But it's just one of those things where I just didn't find it as interesting, as exciting, or as enthralling, or as captivating or compelling as the first 20 minutes. The film picks up, though, story-wise, when it shifts its focus back to Jill Johnson, the character played by Carol Kane. She's older now, she has her own family, and now she's got to deal with another night of terror, a new night of terror with the killer, and has to try to stay one step ahead of him, and so on and so forth. And they tie things up well with the Charles Durning's character coming in and firing off the shots that take out the killer and connecting his whole storyline together with Jill's by the end of it. Uh, and it doesn't have a uh, disappointing, bleak, or dark ending that it didn't earn. The killer doesn't get away with it all over again. They even could have went the route of having Jill's husband in the finale of the film die, but they didn't even go that far, which I was honestly a little surprised by, but pleasantly surprised. But yeah, while the last 20 minutes has its moments, like particularly the sequence in the bedroom with the killer hiding in the bed, thought that was a really well shot and well put together sequence. Even the last 15 minutes is not in the same level of quality as the first 20. So it's one of those movies where if you had a better middle and a little better climax, although the climax the way it is, I can deal with it. It's really the middle that holds this film back from true greatness, if you ask me, and really inserts it more into the realm of just being an alright, okay suspense thriller, despite the grand efforts by a lot of people involved. I think a big reason why the film's first 20 minutes is so effective is because that was based around a previous template that Fred and Steve had already worked with their short film The Sitter. The first 20 minutes are essentially a shot-for-shot remake of their short film with a different setting, in terms of the set, different cast, and a little bit more money. So there isn't much of a difference, though. It's essentially shot for shot. It follows the same beats. And that's fine because those beats are really good. But because they were so young and didn't really have a whole lot of films under their belt in terms of feature films, they kind of just had to uh, swing for the fences, and I think they kind of struck out when it comes to the middle of they. I don't think they did. They struck out when it comes to the middle of the film because they didn't have as much experience in making a middle of a movie as compelling and as powerful as the first 20 minutes that they already had a template for success. They didn't have a successful template that they could borrow from or lift from when it comes to the middle of this movie or the film's climax. So they kind of just had to go and make up things on the fly. It could have been worse, but it also could have been a lot better. Because when you have a manhunt and that's a prime part of your story, I think it works better if you don't necessarily know who the killer is, because once you know who the killer is, then you have this stuff where, okay, you have Charles Durning trying to find him, and there's a bit of suspense there, trying to find him before he kills again, but since you know it's a movie, you already know that he's going to get away, and they're not going to catch him right then and there, and they don't really do anything with it. Oh, okay, he actually goes on another rampage or anything, and Charles Durning can't stop him, and then he goes out of state or something. Like, they don't really go that route. So it's not like the stakes really feel as high as I think the filmmakers or the writers really wanted them to. But like I said, there's a lot of things about this that are really good, including the fantastic, spectacular score by Dana Kaproff. I really love this score. I thought it was amazing. This score really elevated so many sequences because of its ability to unnerve the audience with its dissonant mix of strings and violins and piano. It's a very unearthly and unsettling score, and it works really well with the movie. And I'm really glad that it's included as a bonus on this Blu-ray by Second Sight, because it really is a really fine piece of work by Dana Kaproff. The film was also really terrific on other technical levels, from the editing by Sam Vitale to the cinematography by Donald Peterman. Donald Peterman would go on to become a really highly renowned and acclaimed cinematographer after he did this movie. You could tell that this is a guy who was going to go places as a cinematographer, because he just had a way of really shooting the hell out of scenes, getting the most mood and atmosphere he could out of so little, just establishing shots and so on and so forth. And then you have the cast. I mean, Charles Durning. I always thought Charles Durning did a good job playing roles like this, where he's like a private investigator. I felt this kind of role in particular was a great fit for his personality. And you have Carol Kane, who was a young aspiring actress at the time. This is one of her first big roles, and she just absolutely killed it here. She was really believable and personable and likable, and I think that is one of the reasons why the first 20 minutes is so suspenseful as well, because you genuinely care about her and you want her to survive. Coleen Dewhurst, it's a good performance. I just wasn't that big on the character. I didn't find the character that interesting. Tony Buckley, he was terrific as Kurt Duncan. And even more impressive when you know what he was dealing with at the time. Tony Buckley was dying. He was really sick, and he passed away soon after this film was released. And he even had a mental breakdown of sorts while he was shooting this movie. But he's powered through it and still delivered a very captivating, compelling, and honestly complex performance for a crazy psycho killer. He was just as creepy when he was just doing audio for the phone calls as he was when he was out in the open and wasn't using the phone to really get under the audience's skin. For instance, with the stuff, but the stuff with the phone calls is really well done. I really love the way he delivers certain lines. For instance, when Carol Kane's character Jill, she answers the phone for what seems like the 10th time, and she's finally had enough, and she's asking the caller on the other end, like, "What do you want from me?" And he says, "Your blood all over me." You're just like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Just gives you, really just gives you the chills. And there are other actors who deliver some good roles. I would say the guy who played Superfly, he's a bit uneven. Ron O'Neill, but apparently that was there was a reason for that, because he really wasn't giving the role his all initially. He was kind of slacking and so on and so forth, and you could really see that in his first few scenes. But apparently the director had a talk with him, and he saw how good the performances were by the other cast members, and he realized, I need to step up my game. And I think he did. Ultimately, it was a serviceable role and a serviceable performance, and that's there's something to be said about that, especially considering where it started. The film's around 97 minutes, and the first 20 minutes goes by like a breeze, despite how intense and unrelenting it is in terms of its tension. But then it slows down to, honestly, a crawl in the middle of the movie, until it picks up the pace again when the killer decides to go after Jill Johnson and try to end her life, so to speak. Uh, but that middle is just so middling. It really is, and it makes the film ultimately pretty middling for me, despite the fact that, it's got a lot going for it. Um, I would say it's a film that I would recommend if it looks interesting to you, or you've heard about it and its reputation, but you've never actually gotten around to seeing it. Um, and I would also recommend it if you've seen it but you weren't that big on it. Maybe another time around, it might be a more satisfying experience. I do like it enough to proudly own it on Blu-ray by Second Sight, and this is a really good Blu-ray. It's got a new remastered scan and restoration. It's got the sequel, When a Stranger Calls Back, included as a bonus. It's got The Sitter, the short film. It's got an interview with Fred Walton, another interview with Carol Kane, short interview with Rotani Alda, who plays the. I think she plays like Dr. Mandrakis's wife, and then you have an interview with the composer Dana Kaproff, and there's a poster as well as a collectible booklet with more essays and writing and all that jazz. So yeah, I don't really know what else to say about When a Stranger Calls, except thanks for watching my review, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.